Amazing. Check. Great. Well, I'm really looking forward to this topic because I don't know about you, but I've been to a lot of ABM panels, and I've always wanted to ask follow-up questions, and so this is like an opportunity to get into the specifics. So why don't we start with some intros, and I'll start with yourself, Sumeet, and then we'll work this way.
Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Sumeet Vermani, been a B2B marketer for many years and now founder of a consulting firm called SKB Consulting. Have done ABM in many guises in many organisations, including kind of Symantec and WorldPay, and here to share as much as I can about what I know.
I'm going to be very awkward. Where's the slide with their name?
It's not. There we go.
Yay. Thank you. Sorry.
Hi, Kate Eadie, the Chief Commercial Officer at Insignis Cash. We are a cash management platform, so we allow high cash individuals, companies, charities access to 45 different banks, thousands of savings products, all on one platform. I think the interesting here from my side is I look after sales, marketing, account management, business development, so an interesting seat from an account-based marketing perspective.
Yeah. Hey, my name is Katarina. You can also call me Kat. I do marketing and revenue operations at Adyen. Can I just see, in this audience, do you know Adyen? Could you put your hand up? Oh, good job, do paid marketing. Big faces in the audience, face up with your hand up. Yes, well done. Nice. Yeah, so then you might know that we're a financial technology platform. We mainly do payments. Very excited to be on the panel with someone from WorldPay. We can share ideas now that you're no longer there. Share some with all of you. It's also fun to have a sales perspective.
Nice. Yeah, amazing. I'm really looking forward to this. So why don't we start with what are kind of the misconceptions of ABM? What do you think people tend to not really understand or get wrong about it? And this leads to like a lot of the debate that happens in ABM.
Thank you. We fought over this question when we did our chemistry sync. I know you will add on a few things. I think one of the biggest misconceptions around ABM is that it's its own animal, just something completely separate from marketing or completely separate from all the other activities that you're running, when it really builds on the same principles, understanding your audience, collaborating with other teams to deliver value, and figuring out the best way to reach your audience. Adyen, we're enterprise, so for us, you don't have that many businesses you can really go after. But when you do get one of them to join you or to grow with you, there's a lot of value to be had there. So for us, it's really natural to look for tactics that allow you to have that more targeted approach. But I don't think the core tenets are very different from marketing overall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other misconception is that it's a big budget. You go to big B2B enterprise clients exclusively. We started account-based marketing at Insignis Cash in our super early days, and we didn't go for the big boys. We actually went for smaller strategic players in the market, gained traction with them, and engendered trust in kind of quite a niche space initially, to actually then kind of network and reach out from there. So I think you can do it incredibly lean, and I think it's a great way, bit to the panel previously, of actually aligning your sales and marketing resources all around one kind of end game.
And I would add a slight counter. So I would say account-based marketing is not volume demand generation. And I think there is a lot of evolvement that's happened in this space for it to essentially be replaced and be seen as the same thing when it isn't. We've heard a lot today about kind of this sort of narrative of marketing over here and sales over here, and to my fellow panelists have said, it's about being aligned around the customer. And that's not an account or a set of leads, it's an account and the personas within that account that are going to purchase the product that might fit between you and kind of and them. And so the misconception that I see is that that it's very much the same as what we do today, and it isn't. And it requires a cultural shift if you haven't already got an organisation that is built around the customer, that you haven't got sales and marketing and product in alignment. on the same journey. And so there is sort of a slight difference, I would say, and I think that a lot of organisations are not necessarily set up to kind of do that sort of marketing, which is much more than marketing.
Just to add on to that, I think the other misconception is account-based marketing stops once you've won the account. There is so much more to do once that account has landed, not only in terms of what we call kind of our penetration, but also the retention piece. So we have a structure in terms of we work with a lot of financial advisors, the wealth management industry, and we actually then go out to their clients, they're part of our distribution. So we win one account in terms of the financial advice firm. We then have to sell each financial advisor who then sells their clients underlying. So it's a continuous effort. I think sometimes it stops when they've won the big account, everyone celebrates, they go out for dinner, a few drinks, and then they go off in their disparate ways. It needs to continue through the life cycle of that account.
Yeah. And so it'd be great to get into some specific tactics of how ABM works in practice. I think this is one of the biggest question marks. And so we all agreed that we would take imaginary target customer. We're going to imagine Google, let's just say. We're targeting Google with ABM. How do you get started? How do you try and get their attention and use ABM to try and win that account? And I'm open to any ideas, tactics. The smaller, doesn't matter. So yeah, anyway, go for it.
I'll start. The first sort of, if someone came to me and said that, I would say, why Google? Are they an ICP? Are they actually an account where there is a product market fit with our product? Has there been any kind of signal that says that they're interested and they're ready to actually engage in a conversation and actually go on a journey with us? And then I would get into tactics. So,
Okay.
Often we get these requests that come from businesses as marketeers in lots of different ways. It might have been, what's our social media strategy? Or, in this instance, our ABM strategy when it comes to Google. What are the questions that you're asking up front to then clarify whether or not there's even a step to be taken, and then get into the tactics?
Yeah. Maybe adding on to that, I think you can also decide what does account-based marketing mean for you as an organization. When we got started at Advent, we decided that with the pivot we were looking to make and the opportunity in our business strategy, starting with one-to-many and one-to-few and building up towards one-to-one made more sense. So I think first and foremost, if someone comes with a request like that, are you set up to deliver on it? Because it's a pretty big bet, a lot of resources to go into that one-to-one setup, and I think you need to have some sense of what you're doing. So for us, it was really starting with the basics, like you said, what are the ICPs, where do we want to focus most? Maybe we have 30 verticals where we believe we have a really good product market fit. But what happens if we pick 3 per market where we can really double down and start to create that collaboration? I think we're also quite a sales-led organization, so really learning from them, understanding why have we won, how can we bring that in, what are the tactics where we've been strong previously, we've grown a lot through events, for instance. How can we start to bake some of these things in and test the tactics and the settings where we are comfortable or where we know a lot of the variables and learn from there.
Yeah, I think that data point is really interesting in terms of why are we going after them, what do they look like, what's going to land with them, do we have anyone who looks like them today, and what has worked. And apologies, maybe this is coming from the sales side, I'm a huge data fan. So what has worked well, what can we repeat? And then back to the old school, do we know anyone in our network that has a relationship with them, that has worked with them before? We know, the industry generally is relatively small. Have people moved around? Is there someone who once was a client who is now at Google, or vice versa, that we can just get a friendly face to have a conversation with, to open up, understand what's going on behind those doors, to kind of sometimes get that insights that we don't see kind of when we're looking through our own data insights in or out.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, right? Which is, at what stage are they at, right? In order to even do anything or to know what to do, you need to know where they are at in their buying journey. And so you've mentioned one, which is kind of explore your current network. Are there any other ways that you have tested or tried to kind of understand at what stage is your buyer persona, let's just say head of payments, for example, at what stage are they at in their payments journey? When do you think they'll be ready? Because that's like quite internal information. So how do you find out all of that?
often, I think, increasingly the buyer journey is self-serving. So a lot of, I think it's 83% of B2B buyers generally have already researched and looked into your company before they've even engaged in a kind of conversation with you. So there are a lot of dark signals that are out there that we're not always set up to kind of monitor and try and understand. I think we often kind of lend ourselves to have they filled in a form. I was reading some research recently that said 3% of all website visits convert to a form being filled in. So, you know, where are you getting the signals? Are you getting them from trusted sources? You know, we see that increasingly people want to hear from kind of peers, communities. They want to hear from independent sources. Are we able to understand who we're partnering with? Do they have own data on the customer set that we're looking to target at Google? And are they showing any signals in the content they're downloading or the kind of the interactions they're taking at events? That wasn't me.
You know our names by now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's for Barclays.
Yeah, I think to just add to, I think the more you get involved in, and I hate this phrase because I say it, the ecosystem, it is a trusted place where people go to. I'm sure most of the people in this room are part of some WhatsApp group with your peers, and a new provider will come and it's one of the first places you go to ping on that group. Has anyone heard of these? You know, what do you think? What's the response? And also, who are the other 3 people you would look at? Because in any RFP, you're going to need to be against a few others. Now, a lot of buyers go into that journey already having a strong preference of who they want to go with, and they're just backfilling the other 2. But you need to be in amongst that noise and that peer group where people are asking questions to even be part of the conversation. And I think it's that other piece, just to add on there, is always being on. I think there's sometimes the element with account-based marketing, we tried it for 6 months, it didn't work. You're going to need to be a bit more patient and just keep it ticking over to really see the traction.
I'm curious about you, Kat, because I know ABM is like one of your key marketing approaches at Adyen. So how do you try and understand at what stage your ideal customer is at?
I don't think we necessarily go out there and think like, hey, can we pinpoint where every single account or every single buyer in the accounts that we're going after are at. If there are people that are having a lot of success doing that in the audience, find me after, then I want to hear from you. I generally tell my teams to optimize then scale to try and stay away from the temptation of making things too sophisticated. We have a relatively good sense of the accounts that we are going after. We operate in, I believe, 30 markets. The way that we do account-based marketing in China is very different due to the ecosystem and the behaviors there than it is in Italy, than it is in Sweden, where I'm from, or here in the UK. I think the thing that has helped us the most is to have a really close relationship with our existing customers and try and address those lookalikes. And we are relatively good at doing various kinds of either more formal or informal pulse checks on what's the content that you're consuming, what channels you're in, what events do you go to, how do you want to consume content, and then bake that into playbooks and then go from there and test. Sometimes it's the really simple channels that work. Faith and I, when we were walking over, we were talking a bit about our SDRs. A big part of our success here in the UK has really been just having strong synergies between the outreach that the SDRs are doing and how we can then fuel them with content, essentially. Works really well. It's quite simple. Anyone here can do it with no money at all. So keep it simple.
Yeah, I think it comes down to just understanding your customers super well, which ties into the previous fireside chat where, if marketing isn't even going to the events, how are they going to build those relationships? And then to understand at what stage they're at or be able to know what content they're consuming. And so marketing has to be talking to the ideal customer constantly.
Can I give an example?
Yeah,
a next one. So I was in Berlin 3 weeks ago and I asked to sit in on the marketing and SDR call that they had there. And they were walking through a campaign that they just done where they had researched their buyer personas in home and garden, and they realized that it was a certain demographic. It had a spring theme, this campaign that they done. They ran it during the spring months. And they built the whole campaign around basically planting a seed and watching it grow. And they realized that a large part of their audience were people that they had a good reason to believe they were into gardening. So direct mail campaign, you got a little bag of seeds, you got some nice creative tie-ins with Adyen, you got a few, I think you got like a spade or something, gardening gloves. We had tremendous success. And one of the reasons we had such tremendous success is we're trying to go into a very conservative and very established industry in Germany, which is a very traditional market. So kind of an interesting creative tactic. Because they said that like, hey, this is generally people in their 50s and 60s. They are just not online. They have email. And yes, we can try to email them, but so does everyone else. We can call them. But this is something that we think will help us stand out, will help us differentiate, capture their attention. But at the same time, we're not wasting our advertising euros in this instance on a channel where we're just not going to get through.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point. I think obviously, and your point earlier on kind of the differential between geographies. What you're able to do in the US versus what you're able to do here is completely different because the data challenge is significant with GDPR. Whereas in the US, you can pretty much do anything you like, and so that makes it a lot easier to do things. But equally, demographics. So, generally we're seeing B2B buyers skewing younger, sort of 71%, I think, kind of skewing to 45 and under now. But depending on the demographic and the country, the channels have to be slightly different and your go-to-market has to be different. So just being really cognizant that, yes, we at WellPay, we kind of targeted Booking.com. And we realised that the team at Booking.com were kind of relatively young, and so quite early adopters of social, and so we hit them very hard with kind of targeted social through LinkedIn, and then did sort of boxes that were sent to them, personalised to them. And we won Booking.com off the back of it, but that might not have worked with the demographic that was older and wasn't as active on LinkedIn at that time. And we're talking kind of 2017, 2018, right? So it's a little while ago, whereas that's exploding now. So it's just having that view that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You've got to be quite nuanced in how you do it.
Yeah, this brings me on to my next question, which is scaling. Because I think with ABM it can be a bit confusing because ABM is one-to-one, one-to-many, one-to a few. So what does scaling look like in an ABM world? And I'll kind of leave it open. You can interpret that question as you'd like. Okay.
Yeah, so I think you've got to understand what works, right, before you scale anything. So I think it's starting those smaller campaigns, those smaller collective initiatives across your sales and marketing functions, and really documenting, analysing the results, what's worked, what hasn't. And then you can get to a point of scale. So whether you are doing it by kind of cohorts and segments, and you can actually go all of these accounts, whereas we were doing one-to-one, can now fit into this segment. We have the content that we've tried and tested, and we're just going to roll it out. You could then get onto more smart automation tools, etc. And there's the whole host of MarTech that, my God, I don't think we've got time to go into today, that we can add on to then scale up those pieces. But I think before you get to anything, you need to be really sure about what's working and why it is working, and what are and even we've tried some successful games, tweaked them just to kind of prove it out, to go, this has worked, okay, this isn't going to work for us. So I think it's trying, testing, and then trying to look at cohorts and kind of that matching as to what resonated and why, and how can we escalate that in terms of what we've done.
Yeah, I think what I consider scaling is really changing the relationship between the effort that you're putting in and the results that you're getting out on the other side. So for us, the most important indicator is, are we achieving our goals and are we finding smarter means of doing so? I don't necessarily think that we have to, we shouldn't feel this pressure to cover every single tactic, to buy all the technology, to never get a critical question from sales or from another department where it's like, ooh, we're not focused on that or we're not doing that. We don't need to be so anxious as marketers, in my opinion. We need to be quite focused on 2 or 3 outcomes and good at driving those. So when we've been scaling, I think it's really been, are we able to create that impact, and are we able to do so with a good relationship of, let's say, headcount and spend investment? A lot for us has been to try and identify those things where it's like, maybe you can make it cooler with more money, but are you making it more effective? Maybe you can make more people go, wow, we're excited about it internally, but did you actually move faster? And trying to be quite strict with ourselves, that's been the biggest, very honestly, accelerator for us in terms of scale. The other component is, do you actually have a setup that you that you think is reasonable, where the equation checks out? And I think for us, we're still trying to figure out our path with one-to-one ABM. Does it make, like, to what extent does it make sense? At what point will that additional headcount or that additional investment really help us reach much more impact? We've seen some indications that it can work out, but there are also other times where you put a lot of time and money into something, and then maybe it was just external factors you can't really control, or maybe it wasn't really worth it. That's something we're certainly chewing on. Maybe the final thing before I hand over to you, that we're also really looking if we can crack is how can you leverage AI, because that gives you so much more exponential resource in a way. Can we be really smart with it? So trying to find, I think you mentioned it as well, technology. To increase the efficiency.
That's exactly where I was going to go. So we haven't heard about AI today too much. So I work with a few clients, both in fintech and in other sectors, where we're looking at AI to help get the intelligence on accounts and kind of prospective accounts much quicker. So being able to leverage that technology at scale and to get the intelligence quicker to accelerate programs where we get sort of prospects kind of down the pipe, we get influence in that pipe, we get meetings much more quickly. And so there's an opportunity there in terms of account intelligence and kind of buyer intelligence and using AI from that perspective. But equally, to my point earlier, when you're doing ABM, yes, you're targeting booking.com, but there's probably about 20 people that are involved in the buying process when they're trying to buy, if not more, a payment solution, as an example. So actually using AI to be much more personalized in the delivery of the messaging to each individual is where there is an opportunity for scale. So that doesn't have to necessarily cost the world, but I think the possibilities when we kind of look at that technology, both at kind of accelerating account intelligence and personalization to the buyers, is the opportunity. And I think we all know the opportunity when it comes to content and whatnot, but that's where I see the potential for scale with AI.
Are they tools that you found worked quite well that you can share?
Happy to speak to people afterwards, but with anything with AI, in a lot of the conversations I have with people is look at what you've already got, rather than going out and spending loads of money on new tools. Inevitably, if you're working with a technology stack, every technology provider is building some form of AI capability into their existing products. So go and speak to them first. They're looking for people who want to be kind of seen as a customer who's using their product and make a case study. We're all marketers, we know how that works. Actually be the advocate for them, be the kind of guinea pig for them, and see what you can get out of what you've got, rather than going and spending loads of money on new stuff off the bat because it's sexy.
Maybe adding a couple of things. I think at Agile we're in the privileged position where we built our own AI. It's called Kuma.
Cool.
Only for us. What's great about that is we can feed it almost any information and it stays really confidential. We own that. The bad thing about building your own AI is there aren't millions of other people that are training it. The 4,000 plus people that you work with. So it's good at some things. It's not as good at content creation as ChatGPT, but it's really good if I want to, let's say, summarize any information. If I wanted it to trawl through Salesforce and give me its take on, I don't know, ideal customer profile or job titles, or challenge me on the segmentation that we run, we can do that. But we really landed on ChatGPT probably being the best if you're really looking at scaling content production. That thing's trained.
So the last topic I want to cover today on the topic of ABM is sales and marketing. You've all agreed that you have to work really closely, the sales and marketing have to work very closely in order to outbound and reach out to a target account. So I'm curious to hear, what have you found works well to coordinate those two? And also, when things don't go so well, how have you tried to solve it? And I'd love to start with you, Kate, since you are managing both marketing and sales.
Yeah, sure. And I think that definitely helps because when you have purview over both,
Yeah.
there's almost no kind of competition at the top, I say. For me, it's about understanding the skill sets you have in the room. And I think sometimes, particularly on average, salespeople can be slightly more gregarious, let's say. And marketeers don't necessarily stand their ground when they have so much value to give. They almost need to sell themselves to the sales team. Now, one might say, I don't need to sell myself, you should take me at my own value. You do, come on, we all know that. You go to job interview, you have to sell yourself. So actually understanding the value in the room and what everyone is bringing to the team ahead of kicking off your ABM strategy, I think is really crucial, because then you know who you're going to for what. Because even in the marketing functions, you know, everyone has their own skill set to bring to the table. So understanding what value everyone is bringing ahead, I think really helps get everyone on the same page. And then making sure the KPIs, OKRs, targets, whatever you're heading towards, are the same and bought in across both functions. Because at the end of the day, an ABM strategy is only successful if you're reaching those collectively. If marketing do part of it, but it's not actually resulting in a sale or the account being closed, yes, there's some merit, but you end up with, oh, you've done your bit, I've done mine. We've got to get there together. So I think having those agreed KPIs and understanding who is owning what in that process is really a great way to start and get people on the same page, because we are 100% better together if we're all speaking the same language. I think to the conversation earlier about being at events and our salespeople having the same patter as maybe is going out with the marketing, but if they're not, it doesn't resonate as well, and we're not hearing the same messages over and over on repeat. And the only way we're going to get to that is if we all get together and agree what that message is and ensure the salespeople are bought into it, because to the early point, there might be a reason why it isn't resonating with the audience or something's changed in the target market. So I think that kind of collective cohesion on what you're doing, why we're doing it, and what's the end game is really key, I think.
I would agree. I think Katarina, you said it earlier, it's clarity on definition of terms, definition of KPIs, definition of roles and responsibilities. I think the worst thing that can ever happen in any kind of go-to-market scenario is when there isn't clarity on handoffs, and it's particularly apt when it comes to ABM. So if you're working supposedly as kind of integrated go-to-market function when it comes to ABM, and the handoffs aren't right, I think a friend of mine in America calls it intersections, and at every intersection between a team or a person, there's an opportunity for an accident, and that's where things drop off. If someone doesn't fill in some data somewhere, if someone doesn't take an action when they ought to. So as much as we have technology, we have processes, it really comes down to the people. And if we don't have that clarity of understanding that everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to do and we're on that all the time, and everyone is bought into that in an equal fashion, that's where things can fall down a little bit.
I'm just chewing a little bit on what you're saying, because there are so many variables that you want to get right. If I look at kind of what's worked or not worked in our organization, something that's definitely helped is to have that leadership buy-in. We've done a lot of work to campaign internally. We call it the commercial engine, sales, marketing, SDR, partnerships working together. We have an operating model that we want them to be in. I report to the CCO, so does all the heads of sales. We're really there together saying, guys, come on, we want you to do this, and we're all friends, you can be friends too. Where I've seen that it's worked the best is where you have really strong leaders in market. I think a lot of this is leadership also at that level of, can you translate a strategy and a vision into the execution, and can you stand your ground to solve I think you mentioned it, every point of friction where things can go wrong, where the focus starts to be on maybe attribution, or did you do this, I wanted you to do that, or I'm not fully bought in, or whatever it may be. You gotta have people that back each other up. I think that's mainly having a marketing and a sales leader that are a united front.
The other thing that's just add that I think is quite interesting that we saw in our early stages of ABM is actually ensuring a marketing person goes all the way through. Because to our earlier point, it also then helps them understand what is the messaging that's really resonating in the room, what's landed, what does the whole sales cycle look like for the account close, and then on beyond. So that when we go to do it again or try to replicate it, you've got somebody who's been there, heard it firsthand, then feeding directly back into that kind of core team who are executing.
Yeah, and I think just shifting that mindset from sort of MQLs to SQLs, where kind of marketing's throwing something over the fence to sales, and there's this animosity. In ABM and actually in all kind of business, it's about the customers that we've won. It's the revenue that we've brought in. It's, have we improved the kind of the win rate? Have we improved the average order value? Have we accelerated ourselves kind of to getting those wins more quickly? Those are the metrics that matter. And actually, if we align along that, then kind of the steps to get there become a lot easier.
Yeah. We haven't really had a chance to talk about metrics, but definitely something that I recommend chatting with Sumeet panel later today. Great. Do we have some time for questions? Like one or two?
I think let's do one or two questions,
Yes.
yeah, and then we'll
Great.
break. So here we go. Also, you might get angry looks from the person next to you because they want a drink, but they want. Anyone there? Please do. There must be some.
They're really thirsty.
I think everyone's very thirsty. Yeah, it's
Go.
We have a break though.
Yes.
Who should lead on identifying target accounts and bad personas and kind of recreating them in the CRM? Should it be marketing led or should it be kind of sales led, or is it a combination between the two?
Personally, I think given it's the very start of the journey, it should be a joint effort because you're collectively getting that buy-in early days as to who we want to target. I think there is elements of it in terms of persona creation that's probably got a greater marketing skill set, but there's experience from hopefully a number of people who have sold this, whatever payments or whatever it might be before, that you should also be having in the room to educate who is the best target, if they're in the industry, what are they hearing in the market as to where we should be focusing. So I think given it's kind of that very early stage of the journey, it needs to be a collective effort.
And it's built on revenue, right? So you can't have one or the other. It needs everyone involved because it's about, if we're going after these accounts, these are the ones that we think are the best bet to bring us the revenue number we need. So I'd say it's a combination of what's okay.
I think if you're having a discussion around ownership, sometimes it's also a proxy for who is the final word. And there I don't think it's about a particular role having a final word. It's probably more, if we have to make a call, how do we test what we think is right? What's a good way to move forward where we can see if this persona is better, or is it more important that we, redefine the ICP in this way? I would just try and take an outcome-based approach as opposed to ownership and roles. Because that collaboration is our keyword.
Yeah, follow.
Follow-up question. How often should target accounts be refreshed, and how long would you keep the kind of ABM campaign running for?
It depends.
Yeah.
Totally depends on who you're selling to, what you're selling, right? Yeah, sounds like it's personally an impossible question. I think you're going to have to at least minimum 6 to 12 months as a testing ground. But yeah, I think it's a difficult one to give a defined answer depending on the product you're selling to.
Wherever I've been, we've always run those. We've had regular, every 2 weeks we're having a check-in on what the progress is with sort of everything to do with kind of sales and marketing across the whole business. And ABM campaigns sit very firmly in that. So I think there's that constant iteration of kind of looking at things and everyone being on the same page with regards to how we're progressing. But I think to Kate's point, it's so dependent on a number of variables that it would be difficult to say that's the golden nugget.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success in the US primarily, where we have big opportunity with layering our tactics. There are some that can really be always on. Of course, you may want to refresh, you may want to adjust, you may want to pivot, and you can layer a lot of more short-term kind of term tactics on top of it. I'm trying to think a little bit because you're right. It's how long is a piece of string, but what's a good starting point is probably going back to the metrics of like what's the dynamics in your market, what is it, what does it look like when you're not doing it, and how have you thought about your campaigns previously. Start with what you know, and then try and build a hypothesis from there that you can test, because in reality you're always going to discover new things as you do that. And I think our experience here is what we've seen work, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have a very different dynamic in your industry or for your brand, for your product.
Yeah, makes sense. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon.
Thank you.
Round of applause.